Hello, I am Alberto Grignolo, editor of DIA Global Forum. We're broadcasting today from the DIA Global Annual Meeting in Boston in 2018. My guest today is Dr. Lode Dewulf, who is Chief Patient Officer at Servier in France. And Lode, welcome. Very good to be with you today.
Hi, Alberto.
And you have just finished chairing a session with a long title. It was about patient-focused medicine's development. Where has it led us to today? What challenges remain? And what do we still need to do to achieve success? I would add that Lode is also the co-editor for the patient engagement stream of the DIA Global Forum. So we thank you for your contributions to our magazine, and pleasure to sit down with you today and ask you about this session for a few minutes, if we may. First of all, what specific topics were discussed in the session?
Yes, hello Alberto, hello everybody. So the idea was the first session of the patient engagement track at DIA. Just for the record, there are over 30 such sessions at this meeting, so it's really very important because that's almost 15% of all the sessions that we have this week.
Is this the highest number of sessions on patient engagement ever
yes,
at the annual meeting?
Absolutely. It's more. It's almost 40% up over last year, which I think is a trend that we've seen for several years. And so the goal was, as the first session of the conference, to set the scene, to bring people up a little bit to the same level of knowledge so that they can then better pick in the rich offer that DIA has on talking about the sessions. And so we also wanted to demonstrate what patient engagement is about, which means you start by not asking yourself what would patients want, but asking patients what would you want. And so we actually used the new system that DIA developed for voting slides to first ask the audience, why did you come? And this was the first interesting insight, because almost nobody said, I'm here because I want to know why we need to engage, or to convince myself, or what patient engagement is. This seems to, at least for the people that came to our session, already be quite clear. However, what was very, very important is that 40% of the people said, I've come here to learn what others are doing. And I think that is very interesting. We can learn a lot from each other. And then the second biggest group was, for a total of 36%, was about questions on the how to. How to overcome challenges and how to do it better. And so this is also how we have that we use this feedback from the audience to then structure the session. And so the rest of the session we talked about the 4 main challenges that remain. And they can be bucketed in those 4 is courage. Something that the opposite is what stops you from doing it. It's to actually go forward. It's the legal part. It's the regulatory part. It's the compliance area. The things that need you to get, okay, I want to do this.
You said courage.
It's courage, because we wanted to turn it positive.
Right.
So what has been done in that field, and we gave an overview of good guidance that's come out of FDA and out of other groups to give you that legitimacy basis to step over those hurdles of courage. The second thing was, once you have the courage, you got to have the resources. We talked about, okay, what about budget? What about FTEs? What about capability and capacity building? And so again, we gave an overview of initiatives in the last few years that are building that capability. All right. Once you have that, you have the resource, now you need tools. How to do it, checklists, things like that you can use in everyday practice. And again, one of us gave an overview of progress that's been made and things that need to be done. And last but not least, what about the value?
What is engaging patients?
What is the value? Both in scientific terms, but also in economic terms. And so that was the last topic. So those were the 4 key topics of the meeting.
It seems from your comments that we've gone well past discussing why should patients be engaged or why should companies do patient engagement. We're past that, right? We're now into, well, how do we do it? It's accepted that it must be done. It's a good thing to do. Now everybody's into, okay, how do we do it? Is that a fair conclusion?
The number one issue in science is bias. And so I think that people that go to a session on patient engagement are people that are intrinsically interested into it. So I want to balance this with a real life story. This morning, a patient friend of mine came down in the elevator of an unnamed hotel and they were clearly coming to this meeting. And one of the ladies starts saying, if I have to sit to one more patient engagement session, I'm going to kill myself. And the 2 others echoed or were kind enough to not contradict that. And so my patient friend was very shocked. And I think what it tells you is that we should not be misled by the people in that session. The truth is that they're among the people who saw it, and DI is understanding it, but we have a lot of work to do. And when we look at what motivates people, I always refer to a wonderful YouTube video by Dan Pink, great consultant, who talks about the secrets of motivation, and the number one remains connecting people to the purpose. So we cannot stop talking about the why. DIA cannot stop talking about the why. We can't teach, because otherwise we are going to lose this.
Precisely. The industry has globalized extensively in the past decades. How has this process of globalization changed the way patient engagement is thought about and executed at this point?
Well, it's a really good question, because of course we've all learned that drug development is essentially global. It's economically no longer realistic to want to develop a compound and do the huge time and money investment just for one continent. So, unfortunately, things like ICH, the International Conference of Harmonization, have standardized a lot when it comes to the technical part of the dossier. And there's also convening requirements when it comes to the clinical part. That is not yet the case when it comes to patient engagement. And so there's a reflex that some people have, oh, the patients in my country are so different, so we need to check it first here. And what I've learned in the last 5-6 years on that is that actually the distribution of different opinions and needs may be bigger within one country than they are between countries. So yes, there is an absolute global need, but if you address it systematically, a lot of it can be really global from the start. For example, the way a tumor manifests itself is going to be the same in your body no matter where you live on the planet. And then there's basic personalities. If you're an anxious person, it doesn't matter where you live, it doesn't matter what disease you have, you'll always be that anxious person. So we need to cater for that anxiety if we give information about clinical trials, or a curious person, or somebody who wants to feel in control, or on the opposite, wants to be reassured. So I am very happy that patient engagement is now moving outside Europe and the US, with some early signs of, for example, the Japanese authorities really taking this serious. I had the honor of having a discussion with the head of PFMD last year, and he absolutely said, we are going very serious about this.
The head of PMDA, Dr.
Yes,
Kondo.
absolutely. And he's actually doing that. And so I think that this has to be global, to become global.
Are you in effect calling for the harmonization of patient engagement practices? You made reference to ICH, obviously the successful work that they've done for 30 years. Are you calling for harmonizing patient engagement practices? Is that possible? Is that reasonable?
It's not just possible and reasonable, it's absolutely necessary, because if we go back before ICH, International Conference on Harmonization, every country had its own tox requirements. Some asked 2 beagles and a rat, others 2 cats and a dog, and others 4 chimps. And so we had to repeat a lot of stuff. And bringing that together makes it just much faster and more cost effective. And in the end, patients expect only 2 things of us: bring us innovation and bring it fast. So anything that delays our future research by having these country by country requirements is not serving patients. So we have to do this.
Going back to the session, are there 2 or 3 themes, conclusions that you would like to share with us coming from the session?
So I would say, again, with the bias of the audience and the panel being very convinced,
Understood.
This is something that is absolutely, we have to do, no question. And it's becoming more and more possible to do so because the tools and the resources are being put in place. And so that is probably the one thing I want to go home and do this tomorrow. And the third one is we can learn so much more from each other. We have to continue meeting at events, sharing practices and all of that. So that would be the key.
So this was the first of 30 sessions at this annual meeting on patient engagement,
Yes.
so 29 more sessions to go. What do you expect we will have learned by Thursday afternoon when the meeting closes?
Well, I think a lot of people will go home with very practical things that they can do. And that's the most important. We are no longer here about preaching and saying you should think about this. It's about giving people, it's driving insights into action, what DIA stands for. It's the A from action. We want people to go home and do this. And so that's my biggest expectation and hope that people will go home and say, I learned something that come next Monday, I can start doing it.
And your hope is realistic. You think that by
Absolutely.
Thursday afternoon,
Yes.
sufficient progress may have been made in
Yes,
discussions and
already
debates.
so much, yes.
That's very interesting. Now, thank you for summarizing the session for us. I'd like to ask you a question that's really outside the session you've just shared, but I'm curious about this, and it has to do with the pricing of medicines and how patients might be involved and engaged in the whole debate around the pricing, the affordability of medicines. Do you have any thoughts about that?
Yes, it's a very personal one because an unplanned question like that, I'm speaking for my own account, let me be very clear, but I think it's inevitable. If you just look at the mere statistics, the percentage that people, you and me, pay out of our own monthly income or family income towards health continues to increase at a faster rate than our salaries do. I hate to break the bad news to it. And there are even predictions that say that by 2032, we will spend our total income, if it continues like that, just on healthcare. No more food, no more travel, no more car. That's it. Your whole income goes to healthcare. So it's clearly
Not
unsustainable.
prospect.
Not sustainable, which means we need to go and make choices. And choices will mean that you need to inform people with the information to allow them to make the choices. And it'll be all about value. Today, our healthcare system is about volume. If I, as a doctor, see more patients, I make more money. I prescribe more labs, I make more money. I prescribe more radiography, I make more money. And it's like that in most of the westernized world. That will no longer be the case. I will be held accountable for delivering you value as a patient. And so, because who better than the patient can ultimately judge the value? So I think there will be societal value, companies or countries deciding we want to put our priorities on eliminating communicable diseases or eliminating this or eliminating that. That's perfectly honorable. And then there will be also ultimately individual choices where the patients will say, I want to have a say. And I use a very simple example. If we go and eat at our mother's or our mother-in-law's, we don't complain about the food because it's free. Same when we visit a friend. But the moment we go with friends out and we put $5, we now think we're entitled to choose the menu and at least have a say over it. Well, if we're asking patients to more and more pay, they're entitled to have a say. No say without pay, no pay without say. So I think, yes, it will come. We need to find more structures. I think we need especially HTA bodies to go beyond just looking at numbers and do what the FDA is, look at real life. What does it mean to patient? What is the value, risk tolerance, all of that.
What about cultural and geographic factors and differences that might impact the way patients would get engaged in discussions and debates around pricing and reimbursement of medicines? Do we need to worry about cultural, geographic differences in that regard?
We need to worry because inequality is still today a huge fact. So yes, we need to worry about it. Do I have a solution? Absolutely not. But the fact that it is such a huge challenge should never be an excuse not to start. To just take from another culture a quote from China, even the longest journey starts with one step.
On that note, thank you very much, Lode, for being with us today. Dr. Lode Dewulf, Chief Patient Officer at Servier. For DIA Global Forum, I am Alberto Grignolo. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.